Civilizations we admire were often built on foundations we would find horrifying. The Achaemenid Empire of ancient Persia stands as a monumental beacon of power, a place of stunning art and grand palaces. Yet beneath that golden surface thrived customs so unsettling, they challenge our very idea of normal. By the end of this journey, you will understand the true price of maintaining one of history's greatest empires. We will uncover why a king's justice involved being trapped between two boats and what desperate pleas to ancient gods might have cost the innocent. In a world where breathtaking beauty existed alongside brutal traditions, how does our own sense of morality measure against the past? This absolute power found its most chilling expression in a punishment so horrific it defies modern comprehension. Known as Scaphism, or the boats, this method was reserved for those who had committed the gravest crimes against the throne. The condemned person would be placed entirely within two hollowed-out rowboats, one fastened tightly over the other, with their head, hands, and feet protruding from holes cut into the wood. Force-fed a diet of milk and honey to induce severe diarrhea, the victim would be left floating on a stagnant pond or marsh. The sweet mixture would also be smeared over their exposed limbs, attracting swarms of flies, wasps, and other insects. Trapped in this floating coffin, the individual would slowly be devoured from the outside by insects and from the inside by infection and decay, a process that could take weeks. This was not merely an execution. It was a prolonged, public spectacle of suffering, a deliberate message carved into the flesh of the criminal for all to witness. The king's justice was not swift. It was a slow, inescapable nightmare. Other forms of royal punishment served the same grim purpose: impalement, a practice the Persians are thought to have adopted from neighboring empires, involved a sharpened stake being driven through the body. The victim was then raised upright, left to die over days under the relentless sun, their agonizing end visible to the entire community. Flaying alive, the removal of a person's skin, was another tool of control. These acts were designed to be theater, public demonstrations of what happened to anyone who challenged the divine authority of the king. The terror they inspired was the glue that held a vast, multi-ethnic empire together, a constant reminder that disobedience meant a fate worse than any battlefield death. This control extended far beyond physical punishment, seeping into the very gestures of daily life. Upon entering the royal presence, every subject, from the highest noble to the lowest servant, was required to perform an act called proskensis. This was not a simple bow. For many, it meant fully prostrating oneself on the ground before the king, a gesture of total submission reserved for worshiping a god. To refuse was not seen as a breach of etiquette. It was a direct insult to the monarch's divine right to rule, an act of treason punishable by death. This ritual enforced a psychological hierarchy as powerful as any army. It conditioned every person to acknowledge, with their own body, that the king was the absolute center of their world. Ancient reliefs from Persepolis show this scene repeatedly, row upon row of delegates from across the empire forever frozen in this act of homage. These stone carvings were imperial propaganda, broadcasting a simple, terrifying truth. From the slow horror of the boats to the mandatory bow, the price of order in this golden empire was total, unquestioning obedience. But this control reached even deeper, into the spiritual realm where life itself could become a bargaining chip. When the empire faced drought, famine, or the threat of invasion, the desperation for divine intervention could lead to a horrifying conclusion: human sacrifice. Greek historians like Herodotus recorded chilling rituals intended to appease the gods. He describes a ceremony where 9 boys and 9 girls were buried alive as a gift to the earth deities, a desperate plea for favor from the powers that controlled the harvest and the very ground upon which the empire stood. These accounts paint a picture of a society willing to cross a terrible threshold in its most vulnerable moments. Yet we must tread carefully with these sources. Herodotus and his contemporaries were often reporting from a distance, with their own cultural biases and a tendency to sensationalize the practices of their Persian rivals. The truth of what actually happened is shrouded in scholarly debate, a historical mystery where propaganda and fact are deeply intertwined. Central to this mystery is the cult of the goddess Anahita. She was a powerful deity of waters, fertility, and wisdom, and some historical fragments suggest that in times of extreme crisis, offerings might have been made to secure her blessing, perhaps even for royal favor. Imagine a ceremonial site, a stone platform near a sacred spring, where priests conducted rituals far from public view. Visualize artifacts like the ornate rhyton, a ceremonial drinking vessel often shaped like an animal. While typically used for wine, could such a vessel have held a more sinister offering in a moment of collective terror? The very possibility forces us to confront a darker side of ancient spirituality, where faith and fear became indistinguishable. This leads us to the enigmatic magi, the priestly class who oversaw such ceremonies. Their role is a point of deep historical conflict. The state-sanctioned Zoroastrian religion, which became the empire's spiritual backbone, generally abhorred blood sacrifice, valuing the sanctity of life above all. So how do we reconcile this with accounts of ritual killings? Some scholars propose that the Magi may have preserved older, more brutal traditions that predated Zoroastrianism, or that they operated in a gray area, performing rituals the official religion publicly denied. This creates a haunting duality, a golden empire preaching a life-affirming faith, while whispers of darker, older practices persisted in the shadows. Were these sacrifices a rare, desperate measure, or a hidden thread in the fabric of Persian power? The answer is lost to time, leaving only a profound unease about the lengths to which a civilization would go to survive. Even the legendary Persian military, a force that forged an empire, operated on principles of terror as much as tactical genius. The famed immortals, that 10,000-strong elite guard, represented the pinnacle of discipline, but that discipline was enforced with chilling brutality. For a unit that showed cowardice or failed in its duty, a punishment known as decimation could be ordered. The word itself comes from the Latin for 1 in 10, and the practice was as methodical as it was cruel. Soldiers would be forced to draw lots, and whichever 1 in 10 drew the short straw would be clubbed or stoned to death by his own comrades. This was not just about removing the unlucky few. It was a calculated act to shatter unit bonds and rebuild them in fear, ensuring that the terror of their own command outweighed the terror of any enemy. The message was clear: failure was a collective sin, and the entire group would pay the price in blood. This mindset extended to the treatment of captured enemies. Prisoners of war were not simply locked away. They were assets to be broken and used. Mass mutilation was a common tactic to prevent rebellion. A defeated army might have the noses or ears of every soldier cut off, a permanent, visible mark of their subjugation that made organizing further resistance nearly impossible. Beyond physical marking, populations were uprooted. Entire cities were forcibly resettled hundreds of miles from their ancestral homes, their people scattered across the empire to work on royal projects. This was psychological warfare on a grand scale, severing a people's connection to their land, their gods, and their identity, transforming proud nations into a placeless, manageable labor force. And it is this labor force that built the very wonders we admire today. The breathtaking palaces of Persepolis, with their towering columns and intricate reliefs, were not erected by paid artisans alone. They were raised on the backs of a massive and largely silent population, slaves. The Persian economy, from its monumental construction sites to its vast agricultural estates and private households, was fundamentally dependent on slavery. These individuals had no rights, no personal freedom, and no recourse against harsh treatment. They were property bought, sold, and used as their owners saw fit. The grand reliefs at Persepolis show endless processions of conquered nations bringing tribute, a beautiful artistic representation that masks a grim reality. Those delegates are not just carrying gifts of gold and ivory, they are offering the most valuable resource of all, human beings. The empire's glorious facade was quite literally built by the hands of the conquered and the enslaved. How do we reconcile the artistic and architectural achievements of Persia with the immense human suffering that made them possible? The grandeur was real, but its shadow was long and dark, cast by the countless lives spent as fuel for the imperial machine. This rigid control over life and death was mirrored by an equally unyielding social structure. Your place in Persian society was not something you could earn or change. It was determined the moment you were born, a destiny carved in stone. At the very top stood the king and his royal family, a class of nobles who lived in unparalleled luxury within the gilded halls of palaces like Persepolis. Far below them were the masses, the commoners who worked the land, paid heavy taxes, and served in the armies. The gap between these worlds was not just a matter of wealth. It was a chasm of opportunity, rights, and basic human value. For the vast majority, the path of their life, from their profession to their prospects, was fixed from the beginning, with almost no chance of climbing higher. Within this stratified world, the status of women was a study in stark contrasts, a duality defined entirely by their birth. For royal women, life could be one of immense, though carefully circumscribed, influence. They lived in separate, opulent quarters within the palace, managing vast households and estates. Some, like the powerful Queen Mother Atossa, were known to be key political advisors, wielding significant power from behind the throne. They owned property, controlled their own seals for business, and were adorned with exquisite gold jewelry and fine cosmetics, their beauty and grace a symbol of the dynasty's prestige. Yet this privilege came at a terrifying price. To preserve the sacred royal bloodline and keep power consolidated within a single family, the Achaemenid kings frequently practiced incestuous marriage, often wedding their own sisters or half-sisters. A family tree of the dynasty reveals a tangled web of these unions, where a king might be both husband and brother to his queen. This was not about affection, but a cold, calculated strategy for political control, one that placed the women at the heart of a genetic experiment to maintain pure descent. For the common woman, such political concerns were a distant world. Her reality was one of severe limitation. She was largely considered the property of her father and then her husband, with very few legal rights of her own. She could be one of several wives in a polygamous household, and her primary value to society was her ability to bear children and manage the domestic sphere. While she might have some control over small household crafts or local trade, her life was one of hard labor and obedience, a world away from the perfumed chambers of the royal court. The same empire that produced delicate gold earrings and intricate cosmetic containers for its elite women also accepted a system where ordinary women had little say over their own bodies or futures. How do we reconcile the image of a powerful queen advising her king with the reality of a common girl given away in marriage to secure a business deal? Both existed under the same sun. Both were products of a system that saw a person's worth not in their character or ability, but in their bloodline and their utility to the state. From the slow, agonizing terror of the boats to the chilling whispers of ritual sacrifice, we have journeyed through the shadows of a golden empire. We witnessed a military that ruled through collective punishment and a society where your birth predetermined your entire life, where women of the court lived in gilded cages of political marriage. These were not anomalies. They were the calculated, normalized mechanisms of control for a vast, multi-ethnic empire, the grim price paid for its remarkable stability and breathtaking artistic achievements. This is the central paradox of ancient Persia, a civilization of profound administrative genius and cultural splendor that was simultaneously built upon a foundation of systematic brutality. History is rarely a simple story of good or evil. It is a complex tapestry woven with threads of brilliant light and deep, unsettling shadow. The legacy of Persia challenges us to hold both truths in our minds at once, to admire the grandeur of Persepolis while remembering the enslaved hands that raised its columns. Which of these practices did you find the most shocking? Are there other dark histories from ancient civilizations you believe deserve to be uncovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this journey into the past has gripped you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us as we continue to explore the hidden and often haunting stories that shaped our world.